Good afternoon. Today, the class we'll be taking is hand instruments in operative dentistry. Now, there are a lot of instruments that are required to prepare a tooth, to fill the prepared tooth, to polish the restorative material. Many instruments. Earlier, the number of instruments were very large, but later on, with the rotary cutting instruments and rotary devices, the use of hand instruments have uh, got lessened, but it's not totally out. For precise, for minute corrections or minor preparations or shaping, you always require hand instruments. Now, this is Dr. G.V. Black. He is a person who has brought in many classifications in hand instruments. Earlier, the hand instruments, each dentist used to manufacture this hand instrument according to his requirement of the tooth preparation. So then each dentist used to have a different or separate set of instruments for each type of preparation, and there was no standardization. So the dentists among themselves couldn't communicate. The dentist with the manufacturer, so it was very difficult to communicate. So it was Dr. G.V. Black who brought in the classifications and nomenclatures and standardization of many of the hand instruments in those days. Now, coming to the term instruments, it refers to a tool or device used for a specific purpose or type of work. Now, the dentist must have a complete knowledge of the purpose and application of many instruments that are required in tooth preparation. Now, only if the dentist knows what all are the instruments available, what is the purpose of each instrument, how are they used, what is the manner of use of each instrument, only then the application of that instrument is possible, or he can best utilize the instrument to do the specific work. Usually, hand instruments are manufactured from two main materials, that is stainless steel and carbon steel. Apart from this, sometimes you find instruments having carbide inserts which provide a more durable cutting edge. They have hardware resistance and are not very brittle. Then you have this nickel titanium instruments and carbide tip instrument, non-stick instrument, nitride instruments. But the basic instruments, hand instruments, are made of stainless steel or carbon steel. Now, coming to what is stainless steel instrument or what is carbon steel instrument. Stainless steel instruments, they contain chromium 18%, carbon 1%, iron 81 to 81.4%. Now, the advantage of using stainless steel instruments are the chromium in the alloy reduces corrosion tendency by depositing oxide layer on the surface. So when you use stainless steel, the corrosion is less. The instruments are less likely to corrode, but it remains bright under most of the conditions. Whatever chemicals are used or whatever the purpose of your instrument is, the instrument do not loses luster or corrode. But the disadvantage in this stainless steel instrument mainly is the sharpness of the blade. This instrument loses its sharpness once you heat it or once you sterilize it. It's mainly used as working points or cement mixing instruments or cement placing instruments. But where sharpness is required, it's always better you go for carbon steel. Carbon steel instrument. Carbon steel instruments, they contain carbon 1 to 1.2%, manganese 0.2%, silicon 0.2%, and you have iron 98.5%. Now it is more harder than steel, and when unprotected, it corrodes. These carbon steels are more sharper. It retains its sharpness for a longer period of time. Then you have the stillite instruments. They are chromium cobalt. Cobalt is 65 to 90%, chromium 35%, and trace amounts of tungsten, molybdenum, and iron. They are used. They have high resistance to acid, and they are hard to say, and they are manufactured for mixing and inserting instruments. And apart from this, you have other alloys that are used for making instruments like nickel, chromium, cobalt, and nitride I told you, like for non-stick instruments and composites, etc. Now, there are two types of heat treatment that are done to the instrument. One is the hardening treatment or the tempering treatment. Now, hardening treatment, the steel is heated to 1500 to 1600 degrees Fahrenheit and then quenched in oil to harden the working end. That is, for the instrument to retain its sharpness, this hardening treatment can be done. Not more than 1 to 2 minutes of tip is heated for hardening purpose. Otherwise, the instrument will lose its balance and sharpening after sharpening. So hardness hardens the alloy, but it is always makes it brittle, especially when the carbon content is high. So in hardening treatment, you heat this steel 2500 to 1600 degree Fahrenheit and dip it in, quench it, so drop it in boiling oil. Sorry, you quench it in oil to harden the metal. Then second treatment is tempering treatment. In tempering treatment, cutting edge are usually tempered to produce additional hardness and to remove some of the brittle properties to relieve the stress and strain in the metal. To accomplish this, the tip is reheated at lower temperature. Here you heat it not up to 1500 degrees Celsius. At a lower temperature, you heat it and quench it in oil or acid or mercury at 200 to 450 degrees Celsius for 10 minutes. This treatment relieves the stresses or strain in the instrument and also increase the hardness. Now coming to the classification of hand instruments. This is the classification by Student. Here you classify the instruments basically into two types, cutting and non-cutting instruments. In cutting instruments, you have the excavators, chisels, and others. And under excavators, you have the ordinary hatchet, hoe, angle former, and spoon excavator. And under chisels, you have the straight chisel, curved chisel, or Wiedelstedt chisel, fine-angle chisel, enamel hatchet, gingival marginal trimmer. And in the other category, you have the knife, files, scalers, carvers, etc. Now, the excavators, chisels, and other comes under the cutting instruments. And in the second category, non-cutting instruments, you have the amalgam condensers, mouth mirror, explorers, probes, etc. These are not used for removing tooth structure; they are used for other purposes. And so this is the basic classification of Student. Now, second classification according to Charbonneau, it is divided into three types: cutting instruments, condensing instruments, and plastic filling instruments. Then you have the polishing and finishing instruments, isolation instruments, and miscellaneous instruments. Now, under the cutting instruments, like before, you have the hand cutting instruments and rotary cutting instruments. In hand cutting, you have the hatchet, chisel, hoe, excavator, and others. In rotary cutting, you have the burrs, stones, discs, and other rotary cutting devices. Coming to the condensing instruments, you have the pluggers. They can be hand or mechanical. Then in the plastic instruments, you have the spatula, carvers, burnishers, and packing instruments. Now coming to finishing and polishing instruments. Under the hand, you have the orange wood sticks, polishing points, finishing strips, and under the rotary, you have the finishing burrs, mounted brushes, mounted stones, rubber cups, impregnated discs, and wheels. In the isolation instruments, you have the rubber dam frame, rubber dam clamp, rubber dam forceps, punch. Then you have the saliva ejector, cotton roll holder, excavating tips and equipments. And in the last category, miscellaneous instruments, you have the mouth mirror probe, scissors, pliers, etc. So this is the classification by Charbonneau. And you have one more classification according to Masuk. You have the exploring, according to the use, he has classified it. You have the exploring or diagnostic instruments. Those instruments that are used for exploring the oral cavity or diagnosing for diagnostic purpose. You have the mouth mirror. You have the explorer of probe. In that category, you have the straight probe, right angle probe, arch shape, or shepherd hook probe, and interproximal or back action probe. And other exploring instruments are the tweezers, separators, cheek retractors, airway syringe, etc. And after exploring diagnostic category, you have the isolating instruments. They are the cotton roll holders, rubber dam, saliva ejector, suction apparatus, etc. And the third category is the hand cutting instruments. You have the excavator, like before you have the excavator, chisels, and special forms of chisel or modified chisel. In excavators, you have the spoon excavator, cleoid, discoid, hatchet excavator, hoe. In chisels, you have the straight, mono angle, wine angle, triple angle chisels. And special form of chisel, you have the Wiedelstadt chisel, enamel hatchet, gingival marginal trimmer, and angle former. Then under the restoring instruments, you have the mixing instruments like cement spatula, agate spatula, plastic carrying or filling instruments, packing instruments, amalgam carriers, condensing instruments, round condensers, parallelogram condensers, burnishing instruments like ball burnisher, and conical burnisher. Then you have the carving instruments like Hollenbeck carver, diamond carver, Watts carver, and other miscellaneous instruments like mattresses and retainer, scissors, etc. Now, all these classifications came into this thing to regularize or to separate the instruments according to their use or their purpose. Now, we'll go into each instrument in detail. Now, coming to a nomenclature. In establishing a nomenclature for hand instrument, it was Dr. G.V. Black. He prescribed 4 classes similar to the biological classification. Now, in those days, according to, he divided the instrument into 4 groups. That is, the order of the instrument, the suborder, the class of the instrument, and subclass. Now, order means the purpose. What is the purpose of that instrument? What is the instrument used for? Second, in suborder, it means position or manner, how you use the instrument, in what position you use it, or the manner of use of the instrument was the suborder. The class, the form of the working end. What was the form of the working end? And in subclass, you have the shape of the shank. Now, shank is the angle in between the blade and the handle. I'll come to it. What is the handle and the blade? The handle is the portion of the instrument you hold while working. Then the blade is the working portion of the instrument. And in between the handle and the blade, you have a conical or tapered portion that is called the shank. The shank, usually the angles are given, 1 angle, 2 angle, 3 angle, angles are given in the shank portion. Now, in the nomenclature, any instrument, when you name the instrument, it is named in the reverse order. That is, what is the subclass of the instrument? What is the shape of the shank? You specify, you say it in the beginning. That is, if it is a mono angle, whether it is a binangle instrument, whether it's a triple angle instrument, you write it at the front. Then class you denote in the second position, that is the form of the working end. So whether it is a hatchet, whether it's a hoe. So by an angle, hatchet. Third, you write the position or manner of use, whether it's a push instrument or pull instrument, whether you use it in the push motion or pull motion or lateral cutting. So that is mentioned in the third position, and the purpose of the instrument is said in the last. So when you name an instrument, when you tell somebody what the instrument, then according to this nomenclature, you tell wine angle, hatchet, push, excavator. That means it tells you all the orders about a class and subclass. Okay. Now coming to the parts of the instrument, what I told you a little before. Any instrument will have a handle. The handle is the part of the instrument. It's also which you hold. It's also called the shaft of the instrument. And from the handle, then later you have a tapering portion which ends in the blade. So the portion that tapers from the handle to the blade is called the shank. And that end of the at the end of the shank, you have the blade of the instrument. The blade with the cutting end, if it has a cutting end, it is called a blade or nib. You call it a nib if it has a non-cutting end. And the end of a nib is called the face of the instrument. The working portion of the nib is called the face of the instrument. Okay, so some instruments have the working blade at one end. It's called a single-ended instrument. If you have the blade on both the ends, it's called a double-ended instrument. Now coming to the advantage of a double-ended instrument is number of instrument exchanges reduced, so that you don't have to sterilize more number of instruments. With one instrument, it works as two. You just have to use the opposite side. It may be a mesial or a distal instrument, or it may be a say what left instrument or a right instrument. So both the left and right are incorporated in the same handle of the instrument. Now, single-ended instrument, the safety of use is more. So that the opposite end doesn't hurt the operator because the other end is blunt. But usually nowadays most of the instruments have double ends, so the number of instrument exchange is less, and less number of instruments are present in your armamentarium. Now coming to the handle of the instrument, usually the handle length is around 5.5 inch, diameter is around 5.5 millimeter. Now available in various sizes and shapes, small, medium, and large diameter. Then usually have a hexagonal or octagonal shape. It may be smooth, serrated, or knurled. According to the thing, when you have a serrated handle or knurled handle, it is more comfortable to hold. It doesn't slip out of your hand. Then knurled to facilitate control and to increase the friction by hand gripping. Then instrument formula is incorporated. Now most of the instruments, the formula is written on the handle of the instrument. So when you look at the handle, you know what are the measurements or dimensions of the blade of the instrument. Then sometimes the manufacturer kit number is also incorporated on the handle. Now handle is either continuous with the shank or it can be separated. Some instruments, the handle can be removed by a screw attachment. So if that blade fades out, or it's the same, you can change the blade, but the handle, it can be the same because it doesn't handle doesn't. So instrument tip alone can be changed to when it gets blunt or not in use. Then second portion, as I told you, is the shank portion of the instrument. Shank connects the handle to the blade or nib. Nib, I told you, is the non-working. If the blade has a non-cutting end, it's called a nib. So usually the shank connects the. It is usually smooth, round, tapered, and you can have angles in the shank portion. Now, having one or more bends to avoid the instrument from having tendency to twist in use where force is applied. So here in this diagram, you can see the handle, the tapered shank portion. The first picture, you have there's no angle in the shank. The second picture, you have a mono angle, one angle in the shank. Second, the thing, you have two angles in the shank, so it is called a binangle instrument. Then third, fourth picture, you have three angles. So it is called a triple angle. And more than three angles, you call a quaternary angle, four angles. 1, 2, 3, and 4 angles. Now, according to the angles in the shank, you name the instrument accordingly. Now, why do you require this angles in the shank? It is also called contrangling or for balance purpose. The term contrangle refers to a shank in which two or more angles are necessary to bring the working end into near alignment with the axis of the handle. Now, in the first picture, you can see the long axis, the dotted line shows the long axis of the handle, and the blade portion, there's one angle and the blade tip is away from the long axis of the handle. This instrument, if you use it on a patient, when you give force at the end of the instrument may slip out from your hand. So the purpose of giving more angle is to bring the cutting end or the blade tip to the close to the long axis of the handle. Usually it should lie within 2 to 3 millimeters of long axis. So when you bring the working portion of the blade close to the long axis of the handle, you have better control of the instrument. The instrument do not slip out of your hand when you work with it. Now, advantage of giving contrangling is called it's to prevent rotation of the instrument in the hand, and modified axis. So better the visibility of the blade end while working is also possible when you give this contrangling. And it is also called to balance, to have better ease of control of the instrument. Now, the next portion is the blade of the instrument. It is a functional end of the instrument that bears the cutting edge. Now, it is connected to the handle by the shank. For non-cutting instrument, the part corresponding to the blade is called the nib. As I told you earlier, if the blade has a cutting end, it's called a cutting edge of the blade. And if the blade portion doesn't have a cutting end, it has a blunt end or non-working, non-cutting end, it's called the nib of the instrument. And the working portion or the end of the nib is called the face of the instrument. The working portion, suppose it's a condenser, the tip of the condenser, which has a flat end, is called the face of the instrument. Now, usually cutting edge can be beveled, having a single bevel, bi-bevel, a triple bevel, that is one primary and two secondary bevels, or circumferential bevel. Now, the blade portion, if the bevel is the cut given to the end of the blade portion, so that the blade terminates into a cutting edge. Sometimes the bevel can be given on one side of the blade. If it is given only on one side, it's called a single beveled instrument. And if you have a bevel on both the sides of the blade, it's called a bi-beveled instruments. Usually bi-beveled instruments are used for cleaving or splitting the tooth, and single bevel instruments are used for planing the root surface. And you have the triple bevel. That means the front portion, end of the thing, you have the primary bevel, and both the sides of the blade you have the secondary bevel. It's called the triple bevel instrument. And if you have a bevel around, all round in a circular blade, if you have the bevel all round the circle, it's called a circumferential bevel, like in spoon excavator. And usually instrument, if you have a regular bevel distal to the shaft, you call it a regular bevel, and if it is mesial to the shaft, it's called a reverse bevel, mesial to the shaft, binary. Now coming to two terminology which are more commonly used, you have the direct cutting or lateral cutting instrument. Now, in a direct cutting instrument, force is applied in the same plane as that of the blade and handle. In an instrument, if the handle, the long axis of the handle, if you are using the instrument in the direction of the long axis of the handle, it's called a direct cutting instrument. So, in some instrument, the blade, the cutting action is by moving the blade in the lateral direction, that is in perpendicular to the long axis of the handle. Those instruments you call it as a lateral cutting instrument. Now, for example, a straight instrument having a straight blade or single plane is a direct cutting instrument or a single planed instrument. All the curves and angles in the shank are in the same plane as the handle, and it can be used in direct cutting, or both this direct cutting instrument can be used for direct cutting as well as lateral cutting. But lateral cutting cannot be used for direct cutting. The blade is either curved, you call it a double planed instrument, or lateral cutting instrument. Angles or curves in the plane are at right angle to the handle. So the action of the cutting is in the lateral direction, perpendicular to the long axis of the handle. Can be used for lateral cutting or scraping action. For example, spoon excavator or a gingival marginal trimmer are lateral cutting instruments. Now coming to the instrument formula. Instrument formula. This was also the instrument formula was also given by Dr. G.V. Black. Now you have two numbering systems. One is the 3-unit instrument formula and the 4-unit instrument formula. First, I'll talk about the 3-unit instrument formula. You have 3 digits representing an instrument. In this diagram, you can see on the handle, 3 digits are marked. That is 10-7-14. Now, what does this 10, 7, 14 denote? The first unit is, this is a 3-digit instrument formula. 3 digits are there, 10, 7, and 14. The first digit, 10, it denotes the cutting edge. The first unit denotes the width of the blade of the instrument in 1/10 of a millimeter. That means when you see this 10, the first digit 10, it will tell you that the instrument has a width of 1 millimeter. That is 10th of a millimeter. That is 10 tells you that the instrument width is 1 millimeter. That is 1.0 mm. The second unit tells you the length of the blade. That is 7. From here to here, it is 7 millimeter. The blade length is 7 millimeter. And the third unit, 14, tells you the angle of the blade formed with the handle. Now, the handle, the long axis of the handle is shown by the dotted line, and the angle blade is in this direction. So the angle formed by the blade to the long axis of the handle is 14 centigrade. Now, what is centigrade? Centigrade is the, see, usually Bowley's gauge is used to denote the usually a circle is marked by 3 degree 360 degrees. A full circle is 360 degree, but a centigrade, a full circle is 100 centigrade. So how you measure angles in for hand instrument is by centigrade. It is the percentage of degree. So 17 here, yeah, 14 tells you that the angle formed by the blade to the long axis of the handle is 14 centigrade. So by seeing these three digits, you know the first 10 tells you the width of the blade, that is 1 millimeter. Then second is the length of the blade, that is 7 millimeter. And third is the angle formed, that is 14. It's not 14 degree, it is 14 centigrade. Okay, is that clear? Now this is the instrument formula for the hatchet. So different instruments can have. Now when you tell this number to a manufacturer, he can tell you you want to design your own instrument, but you want this 10 millimeter to be slightly more. You can make it into 20. So you'll have a tip diameter of 2 millimeter. Then 7 if you want, you can reduce it to 5. 14 if you want, you can reduce it to 12. So that according to your the thing, you can communicate with your manufacturer or the operator. Okay. Now second is the 4-digit instrument formula. In 4-digit instrument formula is almost the same like the 3-digit, but in the second position you have a added unit. Now here the first unit is the width of the blade in 1/10 of a millimeter. Okay. Second unit is the angle of the cutting edge with the long axis of the handle. Now this is something new which is not there in 3-digit instrument formula. Here those instruments having a 4-digit instrument formula, there is an angle in the cutting edge. It's not the blade angle, cutting edge angle with the long axis. So in this picture you have 13, 95, 8 and 14. 13 denotes the width of the instrument, that is in 1/10 of a millimeter. So this 13 means the instrument width is 1.3 millimeter. 95 centigrade is the angle formed by the cutting edge to the long axis of the handle. The cutting edge angle to the long axis forms 95 centigrade. Third digit is 8. It tells you the length of the blade, 8 millimeter. And 14, like before, is the blade angle, the angle formed by the blade to the long axis, 14. Usually, 4-digit instrument formula, those instruments having a cutting edge angle have this 4-digit instrument formula. So, for example, you have the gingival marginal tremor, angle former. These are the common instruments that have a 4-digit instrument formula. Hope I am clear with what is a 3-digit and 4-digit instrument formula. Now we'll continue we'll continue the rest in the next class. So that is about how the angle is measured. I told you the circle is represented by 100 centigrade. Okay, thank you for today.